She didn't mean to fall asleep, I know that, because when she woke up, somewhere on Route 9 between the on-ramp and the overpass, she sat straight up and said sorry before she was fully conscious. The way you apologize in the first half second of being awake, before you know what you did. I told her it was fine. It was fine. What I didn't say was that for the 23 minutes before that, I had driven 15 miles per hour under the speed limit and taken the long way home. My name is Owen Calloway. I was 32, a project coordinator at a mid-size architecture firm downtown, which means I spend my days translating between what the designers want and what the contractors will actually build. It is largely a job about the gap between how things are imagined and how they turn out. I had become fluent in that gap. It was also, I would eventually understand, a fairly accurate description of how I had been conducting my personal life for 2 years. I had been at Hartwell Design for 2 years. 12 people, 2 floors, a kitchen on the second level with a coffee machine that someone was always threatening to clean, and no one actually did. Long enough to know which conference room had the broken projector nobody had filed a ticket for. Long enough to know the rhythms of the place, whose deadline was real and whose had a margin built in for optimism, who brought leftovers on Mondays, which vendor could be pushed and which one you called with extra time because they were going to need it. Long enough to know which voice I listened for when I heard conversations starting up across the hall. Her name was Nadia Park. She was a project architect, 31, the kind of person who could hold 12 variables in her head at once and still notice if you'd changed the typeface on a presentation slide. Not because she was hypervigilant. Because she was genuinely interested in the details of things. She cared about what things looked like and why. That wasn't a professional trait. That was just who she was. She had dark hair she kept pulled back most days, with one strand that came undone by 2 in the afternoon, no matter what she'd done to it in the morning. She wore reading glasses for the screen and took them off when she was thinking. You could tell the difference, in her face, between processing and thinking. She laughed at exactly the right moments and skipped the polite ones entirely, which is a rarer quality than it sounds in a workplace where most people are managing some version of how they come across. She was specific and unperformable. After my last relationship ended, and I say ended the way you say concluded, which is to say cleanly, which is to say nobody raised their voice, which is to say Jess and I had been parallel to each other for the better part of a year, sharing an apartment and 2 separate orbits and calling it functional, because neither of us wanted to be the person who named it. I had gotten very good at small circumferences. The office, the apartment, the diner on Thursday mornings when I wanted coffee someone else had made. I wasn't unhappy. I had recalibrated. I had decided that proximity wasn't the same as intimacy, and I was better off being clear-eyed about that than pretending otherwise. Jess had said right at the end, not unkindly, that was the thing, that I was good at being present without being available, that I could sit in the same room, have the same conversation, and still feel like I was behind glass. She didn't mean it as a wound. She meant it as an observation, offered with the particular tired honesty of someone who has been trying to say something for a long time, and finally just says it plainly. I had thought about that for a long time after. I thought she was probably right. I also wasn't sure what to do with being right about something like that. So, I had gotten very good at the small circumferences. This was not unhappiness. This was managed. I told myself there was a difference, and mostly I believed it. Which made it complicated that Nadia was 12 steps down the hall from me 5 days a week, and I thought about her considerably more than I thought about most things. I had been thinking about her for close to 2 years, and I had done nothing about it, which I told myself was restraint and which was, on some honest level I had not fully examined, just fear, organized, well-maintained fear, the kind with good reasons attached. The kind that looks like prudence from the outside, and that you can keep calling prudence for a very long time if you're careful about not looking at it directly. The firm was 12 people. The office was not built for that kind of risk. She was a colleague, and she was good at her job, and I did not want to make things strange. I had been telling myself that for 2 years. I do not want to make things strange, which was a very thoughtful concern, and also a convenient one, because it kept me from having to do anything. Those were the reasons I gave myself. They were not wrong. They were also not the whole story. I was running out of convincing ways to tell them. Thursday was the night I stopped. The firm had a project dinner in the suburbs, a client appreciation event, the kind where the restaurant is chosen for impressiveness rather than food, and the conversation is the performance rather than the point. Too many courses. Ambient noise calibrated to make you lean in. The kind of evening where you shake hands and refill your wine because it gives you something to do while the table talks around you. Nadia and I both drove separately. We ended up at the same end of the table, which was either logistics or something I decided not to examine. She was in a dark green dress, and she'd left her glasses at the office, which made her look slightly unarmored in a way I found hard not to look at. I looked at the breadbasket a reasonable amount to compensate. We talked for most of the dinner in the way you talk when there's a party around you that you're both only partially at. She told me about a residential commission that was taking up too much of her thinking, a client who kept expanding scope without expanding budget, and she was trying to find a way to care about a problem she could not solve. I told her about a contractor who had submitted the same revised estimate 3 times with 3 different numbers, apparently trusting that no one at the firm compared documents from Tuesday to Wednesday to Friday. She laughed at that. Not the polite version, the full one, the one that goes to the shoulders. How has nobody called him on it, she said. I'm building a file, I said. You're building a file on a contractor. I'm building a very thorough file, I said. It's almost complete. She looked at me with something that was almost respect and almost something else. That is the most project coordinator thing I've ever heard. Thank you, I said. I've worked hard at it. The person to my left was explaining cryptocurrency to the person on his left, with the focused patience of a man who has explained it before and intends to keep explaining it until it takes. The table had gotten louder and warmer, and nobody was paying attention to us, which was fine. We weren't paying attention to them either. There was a moment, somewhere in the second hour, when she was making a point about the scope creep client, and she turned to me mid-sentence to check if I was following, the way you do when you're talking to someone you're not sure is actually tracking you. I was following. I had been following the whole time. She saw that, and something in her expression shifted, small, almost nothing, and she finished the sentence without explaining herself, which is a thing you only do with people you've decided understand you. I thought about that later. The moment of checking and then not needing to. It was such a small thing, but I had been paying attention for 2 years, and I knew which things she did with people she had decided to trust, and which things she held back, and that was the first time she hadn't held it back with me. Or maybe it wasn't the first time. Maybe I just hadn't been close enough to see it before that night. By 10 o'clock the evening was breaking up and people were finding their coats. I offered to drive her home because it was on my way, which was true in the sense that we both lived on the north side of the city, which is a broad and forgiving geography. She said yes before I'd thought past the offering, which I noted and moved past. The drive was 25 minutes on a normal night. The city was quiet the way it gets on cold Thursdays. Not empty, just muffled, like everything had agreed to take it down a register. She kicked her shoes off the moment the car door closed, the automatic way you do something when you're comfortable, and we kept talking for the first 10 minutes. Nothing important. The dinner, the client, whether the contractor with the estimates was actually doing it on purpose or just extremely bad at spreadsheets. She thought on purpose. I agreed. Then she went quiet. I thought she was looking at her phone. I kept driving. About 8 minutes in, her head came to rest against my shoulder. I want to be precise about what that moment was. Imprecision would do it a disservice. She was asleep. I understood that in the first 3 seconds. It was accidental. A tired person in a warm car, the motion of the highway. Not an overture, not a test, not anything with intention behind it. And then I kept driving, carefully, and I did not move, and I thought about the specific weight of her head against my shoulder and how entirely natural it felt. How there was no charge to it, no scene, just easy. Like gravity had made a small decision and I had no argument with it. Like the thing that had been standing at a distance for 2 years had gotten quietly, accidentally close, and I could feel that it fit. I drove 15 miles under the speed limit. I took Oak Street instead of the highway, which added 7 minutes, and I adjusted my posture so the angle was comfortable and told myself I was doing it for her sake and not mine. This was maybe 40% true. The city moved past the windows. She breathed at the pace of someone who was genuinely asleep. I kept my eyes on the road and tried to be a reasonable person who was not reading into this. I was reading into it, not because of the sleeping itself, because of what came about 12 minutes in. Her hand found my arm without her waking, just rested there, fingers loosely curled around my wrist, the way you close your hand around the nearest solid thing in the dark. Automatic, unconscious, not designed. I did not move. I kept breathing at the same pace, and I thought, with the total clarity that only arrives when you're working very hard not to think, The gap I have been standing in was not wisdom. The caution was not restraint. It was fear with better posture, and I have been calling one thing the other for 2 years. Her fingers tightened slightly. Still asleep. I took the long way. I was not ashamed of that. When we hit the overpass, she stirred, sat up quickly, said sorry before she was fully there. "It's fine," I said. "I can't believe I—" "How long?" "Not long." I said it like I hadn't been counting every minute. She pushed her hair back, looked at the window. "The week has been the Callaway and Son Commission," I said. She turned. "How do you know about that?" "Martinez mentioned the timeline in Tuesday's stand-up," I said. "And you've had the expression you make when a project has no clean answer yet." She went still. "I have an expression?" "Small crease, right side." I didn't gesture, just said it. "You make it when you're looking for an approach that isn't there yet." She was quiet for a full moment. Then, "That's very observant." "It's my job to notice things." "That's not your job," she said. "Your job is project coordination." "Same skill set," I said. "Different paperwork." She almost laughed. Then she went quiet again, and softer. "I didn't know you were paying that much attention." I kept my eyes on the road. "I pay attention," I said. "I'm just not loud about it." She didn't say anything, but her hand, which had been back in her lap, moved toward the console. Not quickly, the way you do something you're still deciding about. She found my wrist, resting on the gear shift, and her fingers closed around it. The same way they had when she was asleep, except she wasn't asleep. I did not move, neither did she. We drove the last 3 minutes to her building like that, the city doing what it does, her hand on my wrist, neither of us pretending it was nothing. She didn't say anything when I pulled up. She looked at the floor, at her shoes still lying there, and then she looked at me, not the focused working attention I knew from the office, something without its guard up, just her, deciding something in real time. "Owen," she said. "Yeah." "I wasn't asleep," she said. "Not the whole time." There it was. "I know," I said. "The hand thing." A pause. "The hand thing," she said. Something settled between us. The right kind of quiet. Not the tension before something, the thing that comes after, when both people stop performing uncertainty about something they were already certain of. "I've been paying attention for a while," I said, in case that wasn't clear. She looked at me for a long moment. "I was hoping," she said. "I just couldn't tell. I'm not loud about it." "I know." She said it like she'd suspected this for longer than tonight. I noticed. Eventually. She picked up her shoes, opened the door, paused, half out, cold air coming in, and looked back at me with the crease she made when something had no clean answer yet and she'd decided she was okay with that. "Drive safe," she said. "Text me when you're inside," I said. She did. 6 minutes later, 3 words and a period, which is how she texts when she means it. I know this because I had, over 2 years, received a handful of texts from her about project-related things. Schedule changes, contractor questions, one message about a building permit that turned out to involve more layers than anyone had anticipated, and I had, without fully registering that I was doing it, cataloged how she texted when she was efficient and how she texted when she meant something. The periods, the complete sentences when it mattered, the way she never said just before a thing she was completely serious about. I sat in my car in front of my own building and read it twice, and then went inside and sat in my kitchen and thought about the gap between how things are imagined and how they turn out. My whole job was about that gap. I had been standing in it, with her, for 2 years. This was the first time the outcome exceeded the imagining. I thought about everything I'd told myself. The firm is small. The risk isn't worth it. The restraint is wisdom. I had built a very clean, very well-maintained case for staying in the gap, and I had been so busy maintaining it that I hadn't noticed it had been holding me still longer than it had been protecting me. She had noticed before I did. She'd been hoping. She just couldn't tell. I should have been louder. I hadn't been, and somehow she noticed anyway. I kept coming back to that, sitting in my kitchen at 11:30 on a Thursday night, that she had been watching something in me that I hadn't known was visible, the way I moved when I was paying attention, the things I named before she had to name them. She had filed those away the same way I had filed away the crease and the glasses and the strand of hair that came undone by 2 in the afternoon, and she had pulled them out when they mattered, 2 people paying attention to each other from across a hallway for almost 2 years. Taking the long way and not saying so. It was not immediate after that. We're both the kind of people who approach things with some care. which meant 2.5 weeks of being very deliberate about accidentally running into each other at the coffee machine. A Tuesday where she stopped by my desk to ask about the Martinez timeline and stayed 40 minutes because we found other things to talk about. A Wednesday lunch that was technically 2 separate lunches taking place at adjacent tables by mutual coincidence, which fooled nobody, including us. The office was 12 people. We were not careless, but we were no longer pretending either, and there is a specific quality to not pretending when you have been pretending for 2 years. Everything is lighter, the hallway is a different length, the broken projector in conference room B seemed less annoying. I filed a maintenance ticket on it, which I realize is not romantic, but it is what happened. I asked her to dinner on a Thursday evening, because Thursday was the right day for it, not the end of the week where everything feels conclusive, not the beginning with too much of it still ahead. She said yes before I'd finished asking. We went to a small Italian place near her building, with mismatched chairs and a wine list chalked on a board. We talked for 3 hours, not about Hartwell, not about the clients, not about the contractor with the estimates, about the things you talk about when you're finally not the people you are at work. She told me that when she was 12 she wanted to design museums. Not any kind of museum, specifically the kind where people could be alone in public. She still knew exactly what she meant, certain light conditions, a particular acoustic quality, the feeling of being surrounded by other people who were all somewhere else in their own heads. She had a very complete picture of it. I told her that was the most accurate description of what good public architecture was supposed to do that I had heard in 2 years at an architecture firm. She looked at me the way she'd looked at me in the car, like I had confirmed something. I drove her home. She did not fall asleep. When I pulled up, she turned toward me and said, "Last time I didn't say goodnight properly." "Last time you weren't sure yet," I said. "I was sure," she said. "I just wasn't ready." She was ready now. That was 16 months ago. She still kicks her shoes off the moment she gets in my car, before I've even pulled out of the spot. It has become one of those small automatic things, the ones you see in the peripheral vision of loving someone, the things they do when they don't think about it anymore. She still gets the crease when a project has no clean answer. I still notice. She still tells me I'm observant, in a tone that means both that she appreciates it and that she finds it slightly absurd, which I think is an accurate read. We work at the same firm. 12 people. Everyone knew within a month. Nobody made it strange, which says something about the people we work with, and something about how you carry a thing. Whether you treat it like a secret or a fact, we treated it like a fact. Facts are simpler. Some mornings I drive her to the office and she has coffee in the blue thermos she uses when she's running behind, and she talks about whatever is living in her head, a problem she's trying to solve, a detail she got wrong the first time, something she read that connected to something else in a way she hasn't worked out yet. I listen. I notice things and say them. She does the same. That's most of it. 2 people paying attention to each other with the care you give to something you don't want to get wrong. She fell asleep on my shoulder on a Thursday night in November and held my wrist tighter, and 3 minutes later I stopped in front of her building and she told me she hadn't been asleep the whole time. I drove 15 under the speed limit and took the long way home, and I would make that same drive again without having to think about it. The gap between how things are imagined and how they turn out. I spent 2 years being very fluent in it, standing inside it, calling it prudence. This was the one where the real thing was better than the version I'd been carrying around, careful and intact and never used. I should have been louder sooner. She noticed anyway. That's the part I still think about. After everything, all the careful distance and the organized restraint and the long way home, she had been watching something in me the whole time, and she noticed anyway. What would you have done if someone you'd quietly watched for 2 years held your wrist in the dark of a car, and you both knew exactly what it meant? And have you ever realized that the careful thing and the right thing had stopped being the same thing, and you'd been calling one the other for too long? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.